Charlie Starkweather wrought a trail of cold-blooded murder across the West, the likes of which America had never known. 31 years later, his so-called accomplice, Caril Ann Fugate, still maintains her innocence. She was released in 1976 after 18 years of a life sentence. In an exclusive interview with our producer, Nancy Gershwin, Caril Ann says the real story of the Starkweather murders bears no relationship to the legend.
I mean, an entire state was terrified. But my God, he had me in his clutches. And I was not a Bonnie and Clyde having fun as it was depicted. This is not true.
In 1958, 14-year-old Caril Ann Fugate lived in this house with her mother, stepfather, and 2-year-old half-sister, Betty Jean. Her older sister, Barbara, had introduced Caril to one of her ex-boyfriends, a 19-year-old garbage collector named Charlie Starkweather. Charlie was the first boy Caril had dated, and while he seemed like a nice guy, she decided to break up with him because he was getting increasingly possessive.
I told him, you know, it was over. I didn't want to see him again, and all this kind of stuff. And he started arguing and stuff. And then he left, and then he came back, same night. And this time I told my mom, tell him I meant it, you know, okay? And my mom then told him, and this is where an argument came in, that she had told him, you know, I meant what I said, and go away, and don't come back, and all this kind of stuff. And at that time, his words were to me, if I can have you, I'm going to make sure that no man ever has you. And that's one prophecy that he has seen too, you know, that's for sure.
Among the stories that surfaced over the next 3 decades was one which claimed that Caril calmly watched television while Starkweather murdered her family. She calls this total fiction.
I sat and watched television while he rammed a gun down my sister's throat. And I'm going, oh, what is this? And how do they have the right to put something like this in a book when it's not true? It's not true.
She claimed she came home from school one day to find Starkweather hiding behind the door with a rifle.
The minute I came into the door, he shoved the gun into my face and had me sit in a rocking chair. And this is when he told me at that time that my family was over at this woman's house, you know, and if I did what I was told, they wouldn't be hurt. All he had to do was make a phone call and they would die.
Caril placed a note on the front door which said, stay away, that everyone was sick with the flu. She signed it Miss Bartlett, the name of her 2-year-old half-sister. This, she claims, was her way of indicating that something was wrong.
She states that she did that to tip people off that something was wrong. That is totally inconsistent in my mind with the idea that she was willingly going along with something. Why would she do something that would tip people off that something was wrong?
Caril's older sister, Barbara, living away from home at the time, was among those turned away at the house.
And I know to this day that's why she wouldn't let me in that house, because there was something wrong. And now, like I said, I know why. I've known now for a long time that he was behind the door with the gun.
According to Caril, Starkweather then forced her to accompany him on his killing rampage. The rules stood. She was to cooperate, or he would make a phone call, and her family would be dead.
You're thinking inside, you're thinking, catch him, catch him, catch him, and you're thinking at the same time, don't catch him, don't catch him, don't catch him, because he'll make a phone call, my family will die.
The first killing was a local farmer named Meyer, who had in the past permitted Starkweather to hunt from his property. Starkweather shot him for no reason.
Now, I'm thinking now, he's killed. I know what he's capable. And I'm going, whoa, you know, I better be very careful and don't cross him. Because if he could bring that gun up in an instant and wipe out this man's life, that he don't really, you know, what could he do to me?
Starkweather and Fugate made their way to the highway to hitch a ride. High school senior Robert Jensen and his 16-year-old fiancée Carol King were driving home for the evening. They stopped to offer Starkweather and Fugate a lift. Robert Jensen's parents became concerned when the young couple failed to return home. The savage events which were taking place would have been beyond their wildest fears. Starkweather led them to Farmer Meyer's storm cellar. He shot Robert Jensen 6 times in the head. Carol King was raped and mutilated with a knife. No evidence was presented to indicate that Caril Fugate played any part in any of the killings. But she says she was so scared for her family's well-being, if pushed, she doesn't know what she would have done.
He never asked me or ordered me or anything to do on those people, but I don't know if he had have, if I would have, I don't know, because he never asked it of me or ordered me to, but I don't know. I don't know if I would have, if it meant, I'm sorry. It is just so painful.
The state has never contended that Caril did any overt act, such as actually pulling the trigger, such as stabbing anybody. It has always been strictly a question of her attitude.
Did you ever break down and cry and beg Charlie to let you go or anything like that?
Yes, I cried all the way.
Now, had you gone with him for quite a while?
Yes, I went with him a year before, and then I told him I didn't want to see him again, but he came back. And after that Sunday, I went with him, and then I kept telling him to leave. And that Sunday, I told him to leave, and I told him I didn't ever want to see him again.
What had brought you to this conclusion? Why didn't you want to go with him anymore?
I think he's crazy.
Do you think that Charles got what he deserved when he was convicted to the electric chair?
That's not my place to say.
The jury saw a cold, defiant girl. The defense maintained she was still in shock from the killings and from 8 months in a mental institution where she awaited trial because at 14, she was too young to go to prison.
I think a person has to understand what she went through between the time of her arrest, not only in terms of the crimes itself, but from the time of her arrest. She was incarcerated in a mental institution, in one of the most violent wards of a mental institution.
I presented to the public, you know, this person that, you know, well, look at, you know, she's hard and she's this and she's that, not knowing that behind that was a person that was terrified, you know, and hanging on, you know, like, you know, please, God, don't let me lose my mind. That was my prayer. Don't let me lose my mind after what I'd been through.
The prosecution used her detached demeanor to indicate that Caril went willingly with Charles Starkweather, knowing at the time that her family was murdered, that she, in fact, may have helped to kill them. Starkweather's 11th victim was Merle Collison, a traveling salesman who was murdered while asleep in his car. At this point, a passerby intervened. Seeing the skirmish, Wyoming Sheriff Romer came upon the scene. Caril Fugate ran hysterically towards him. Charles Starkweather sped off, only to be captured minutes later by Wyoming authorities. If Caril's contention is true, that she went with Starkweather only to save her family, she found out the awful truth that night in a Wyoming jail when a man offered her his condolences.
His words were, I'll never forget his words. And they said, my God, girl, you know your family's dead. And it was, see, it was at that point that nothing meant really anything, you know, because I had felt that, you know, that I had failed to save him. I had how many days that I had spent with this man, you know, and thought what I was doing, you know, was saving him. And then to find out later that they were already dead, you know.
Caril Fugate grew up in prison. She's employed now as a hospital orderly and child care worker. She never married, has no children. She still maintains her innocence as well as an optimistic outlook.
Do you feel cheated out of your life?
I feel cheated. I feel cheated, yeah. But see, I'm not going to, I'm not going to let the little green-raged monster destroy, what I have left of my life. I'm not going to do it.
In an effort to publicly demonstrate her innocence, Caril took a televised lie detector test, which came out in her favor. She also had clinical psychologist Len Bergantino question her under hypnosis for television.
I don't think there's a chance in the world that she's a murderer or an accomplice.
I know my sister Caril could never kill anybody. She could never hurt anybody.
In over 31 years, you never doubted your opinion of that?
No. No, and I never will.
While her sister has always believed in her innocence, to most in the state of Nebraska, the name Caril Ann Fugate still conveys the image of a cold-hearted accomplice to murder.
I think she's guilty.
I'm pretty convinced that she is guilty.
I think she's guilty.
Well, I think she was guilty. She was right along with him, I'm sure of that.
I don't think anybody knows for certain one way or the other.
What is the one thing that could now make Caril Fugate happy?
Is to have one person in Nebraska who always, always believed, with no doubt, that I was guilty. Understand what transpired through this and say to me, I might have been wrong. One of the people that I admire in this whole thing is Robert Jensen's father, Mr. Jensen. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they asked him, they said, how can a father come to this kind of conclusion? He said, that's what my son would say.
31 years later, Caril still mourns the loss of her own family.
I've just started recently able to put their pictures up because it's so hard to look at that little baby and know that she must have suffered. All these people, Oh, God, stop